Guys, narratives drive bull and bear markets. Anytime there's a major bull market or bear market or major volatility, 9 times out of 10, it's going to have a huge narrative attached to it. This is industry agnostic. This goes for stocks, this goes for bonds, this goes for crypto. Like you always hear about, oh, stocks are high, people are getting into bonds. The narrative is yield, whether if it has utility behind it or not. Same thing with crypto, RWAs, you have DeFi, you have the NFT narrative, Bitcoin halving narratives.
Today, we're going over Narrative Economics by Robert Shiller.
Do you want to talk about what we're going to show?
So as he was saying already, narratives can be traced back to the source a lot of the times for any type of market action. For any asset, there is pretty much. Even down to if your family should buy a car or not. And that car probably depends on the current narrative. And we've seen it with the EV space as well. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it, man.
So if you guys watch any of our previous book analysis, you guys know that I've been taking notes on all the books that I read. So we're going to go through the notes. We're going to expound on the topics, demystify what's not self-explanatory.
Expand, expound, unpack, unravel.
And just talk about narratives.
And the reason we're doing this book right now is because you can look at any asset class right now and what's happened in terms of price action has been driven by narratives. Narratives have been pretty strong lately. And so we felt that it was a great time to actually talk about narratives in a larger sense, stepping outside of the box.
All right, guys, let's start off with the first point. So most narratives have a leader as a catalyst. The leader is often not mentioned as much as the narrative gains momentum.
We'll just use the easiest example, honestly.
That's Satoshi Nakamoto.
Well, in the beginning, among like a very esoteric group of people, you would hear Satoshi Nakamoto. And as much traction as it gained were people who were interested in the space, but not yet in it, which was still a very small group of people. Actually, in the beginning, let me backtrack. In the beginning, no one knew anything about Satoshi Nakamoto unless they were early Bitcoin developers or people who were interested in digital currency in the 90s, for example. Other than that, no one heard of Satoshi in 2008 and 2009. And the alias became somewhat famous during 2016, 2017 or whatnot, but didn't get any mention at all. And Bitcoin was that offspring of his that got all the attention. And we're still here today.
Guys, what a narrative boils down to is stories. That's the one thing humans been doing since the beginning of time. Sitting around fires, even before we discovered fire, telling stories. We're emotional creatures, and stories is how we remember things. They say facts tell, stories sell. It's the reason why they say that. So the narrative attached to something, it makes you feel a certain way. And narratives can be attached to projects or industries that have fundamental value, or it can be complete bullshit. Just like the tulip bubble was a narrative, ICO bubble was a narrative. Most of the projects were trash. But computers was also a narrative, and computers ended up being a huge thing. Tech companies. You can't have tech without computers. If you really think about the basis of it, the internet. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
All right, moving on to the next one. You ready? People love fake...
Give me a second. So, no, go ahead.
People love fake stories. Twitter has more retweets for fake news.
It's a small one, but guys, if you think about it, fake news travels harder than the actual truth because we love drama. What's the percentage? Imagine the percentage of conversations that's drama? Like 60, 70, 80% of conversations are drama.
These days?
Like gossip and stuff
these
like that?
These days, 85 to 90.
Yeah, so it's like, guys, people have these fantasies in their head that they want to see happen, and it makes it harder to not believe it.
Like, imagine if...
A lot of narratives are bullshit.
Imagine if any beloved celebrity of yours, whoever you guys love in the world, your favorite person, let's not in your actual life, but like a celebrity, right? Let's say if there was some fake news of them passing. We've seen it before. That stuff spreads pretty quickly. and people start to rush to confirm, and that's when you find out it's fake like a couple hours later or whatever, right? Because those narratives move super quick. And so that's an example of fake news spreading like wildfire. People love fake shit.
And also what
People love.
happens
So, no, go ahead.
and also what happens is the people who are like rational investors, they know people are going to invest into it, so it causes people to actually invest into it with that purpose. So it kind of just compounds on itself.
I mean, let's look at, a big one today. People saying Bitcoin is going to replace the US dollar. Now, we love everything about what Bitcoin stands for, and the fact that it's kind of like the Tesla of cryptocurrency. Without it, nothing else would be happening right now in the space without Bitcoin, right? But people said it was going to replace the US dollar, and I knew immediately when I heard that back in the day. I'm like, okay, that might be a little stretch,
Decentralization is a narrative in and of itself too.
Yeah, decentralization is a big narrative, and that's a good narrative, though.
Narratives can move like within each other too. So a lot of different narratives within Bitcoin. If you think about it, you got digital money. You got
this is what you would call a constellation narrative.
Yeah, you got the interesting. We should expound on that. You have the decentralization narrative. You have the DeFi narrative. You have this narrative of
within DeFi,
a hedge against inflation. You remember that? Like Bitcoin's a direct hedge against inflation, but it didn't prove out
even
so
what
much.
we just said, replacing the US dollar, that was a big narrative.
Yep, replacing the US dollar.
Security was a narrative.
Replacing gold. It's a huge narrative. And the narrative of Bitcoin replacing US treasuries as the dominant collateral in the world.
Yeah, so that's kind of like what you would call a constellation narrative. And you can think of a constellation as, it looks like it's randomness within a structure. And that's kind of what it is. There are like maybe one overarching narrative, and under that there's this random structure of connected narratives in between, flowing in every direction, and they all tie into each other some way, shape, or form. And so you can look at that way. And so this could theoretically, I mean, you could have one overarching narrative and have 50 other narratives on the inside of that narrative, because even within these narratives under the meta narrative, you're going to have more narratives under that. We could have kept going here, but yeah, the point is they can go on forever, because if you have a sub narrative, you could theoretically keep going.
All right, guys, let's move on to the next one. So it says, most people have little or nothing to say if you ask them to explain their objectives or philosophy of life, but they brighten at the opportunity to tell personal stories, which then reveal their values. So that's just proving the point that we like to talk in stories. We make decisions from our emotions, and we use logic to make them make sense. Yeah, like you ever had something where you're like, oh, like for example, you're buying a car, you shouldn't be buying it, but then you're like, oh, well, this one gets good gas mileage, so it can save me here. Like, if you want to believe something, you'll come up with reasons to believe it. If you don't want to believe something, you come up with just as many reasons to not buy that car.
Yeah, just to kind of expand on that a little bit. So even with this, sometimes there is a narrative around talking about something that may say something about the type of person that you are, that you don't necessarily want to give off in the moment. For example, if you're out, let's say in a bar, right? Maybe a bar sometimes, depending on the person or depending on the two people talking. But most of the time, anytime you hear a conversation in there, it's going to be about what we just talked about, drama. You're going to hear people talking about maybe their childhood even. You're going to hear a bunch of stuff. You're going to hear a bunch of different conversations. All right, moving on to the next point. In all of fiction, there are only 20 master plots: quest, adventure, pursuit, rescue, escape. All right, y'all, this next one right here, it says love, but I thought it said bv. Just so y'all can see that. It took some time to discern what that was. Love, forbidden love, sacrifice, discovery, wretchedness, excess, ascension, and descension. And so that's basically boiling down every story that you've ever heard, fiction, like a real story, it falls under one of those categories, aka that can be the overarching narrative.
Try to think
for
of
that
one
story.
movie that didn't have one of those as the plot. I tried to and I couldn't.
Superman. So, no.
What's that one Vin Diesel movie?
Fast and Furious, all of them.
Vin Diesel was in that? Say no.
I was about to say, God damn, buddy.
Let's move to the next one. And after I read this, I want to break down how this applies to investing, which is pretty cool. So it says viruses/narratives die eventually if the contagion rate is lower than the death/recovery rate. So you can think of the pandemic. I'm not going to say the word because I don't want to get, whatever they do on here on YouTube, blacklisted or whatever.
We'll mouth it. Say no.
Woo. So narratives in the book they break down how narratives basically spread like viruses. So you have a contagion rate, which is the rate at which it's spreading. So contagion works like networking effects. And a famous example of networking effects is the telephone. If it's just two people using the telephone, only one person can call one person. It's only one connection. But when it's three people, it's 6 connections because of the networking effects. This person can call 2 people. Number 2 can call 2 people, and the third person can call 2 people.
Imagine if it's 100,000 people. Now everybody just be calling everybody all day. So, no.
But seriously, So that's the same thing applies to investing. So when you're trying to invest into a narrative, you want to look at the growth rate. Because sometimes the metrics, like if you're investing in the crypto, for example, sometimes you'll see the metrics start to, like DeFi, the TVL will start to increase before DeFi projects increase because the narrative hasn't caught fire yet. Sometimes the narrative happens off something that's actually good. Sometimes it's just smoke and mirrors, like I said, the ICO. But look for exponential growth.
There was a narrative on STO, security token offerings, that was kind of picking up steam back in the day. That died extremely quick. So that's probably a good example of the contagion rate being probably significantly lower than the death rate. All right, I don't know why Vince is invisible, but we're going to move on to the next point. The narratives become economic narratives when they include stories in which others take action and describe their actions they take, such as investing and getting rich in certain financial markets.
Basically, he's just saying, like, when people buy Bitcoin and they're at home for Thanksgiving, they're showing off their wallets. People love saying, oh yeah, I got some Dogecoin, I got some Shiba. Those meme coins, they're just huge narratives. They're huge communities, huge stories. And people just want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Like this is getting super, off the rails, but like all societies, religions, civilizations, they praying to the stars, they're praying to the trees, they're praying to God. Like we all have a natural urge to want to worship something higher than ourselves.
Think about Dogecoin and that the first meme craze back in the day. I mean, when Dogecoin took over, people were simply jumping on board and they would tell you, "Oh, I like the dog," or "I don't know, I just like it." Or some people would stay attached just because they enjoyed the culture of the people, and it wasn't necessarily the dog. There was the camaraderie around the dog and not the dog itself and the coin itself. And so think about how crazy that went. People were like, that one dude became pretty famous in the subsect, of course. He became pretty famous because his portfolio went from about 100,000 to like 3 million, and he never sold, and it obviously dropped eventually again, and he lost everything. So that was pretty crazy. If you make $3 million off of Dogecoin or anything meme coin, you better sell it.
Yeah, that's the one thing with narratives. You want to have a plan to get out before you get in. You don't want to get caught up in it. You want to get what Mark Cuban say? Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Don't be greedy. By the way, we do have a course in the community where we show you how to do all that. So if you want to book a free session, the link's down below. Anyways, marketing is more effective when the story causes an individual to imagine himself to be another person using I instead of you versus an analytical explanation of why you need the product.
Like back in the day, like even growing up, like if you're from like a neighborhood that, is on a rougher side, you probably had a lot of hoop dreams, especially back in the day. Now it may be different. I don't know what they think about now. But like you had a lot of hoop dreams, right? And a powerful story that the NBA pushes was dreams. Dreams. You hear all the players talking about it. You hear them talking about it, changing that lifestyle up. And it was relatively easy to envision yourself a lot of the times as an NBA player because they kind of laid it all out there for you just so you could envision that. And so that's one narrative that's probably still here today that's been around, since basketball has hit the main scale. And yeah, you can look at that as literally an example of how the story sticks more when it's I, or the narrative sticks more in the mind of the individual, which translates to, the masses.
Yeah, and just to expound on that, that's a great point. If you think about brands, it's the same concept. Like, we want to be attached to whatever spirit that brand is selling. Like, I remember reading in Phil Knight's book, he said, when you're building a brand, you're not selling a product, you're selling a spirit or a way of being. And the best brands, they don't talk about their products in their marketing. They're selling a way of being. Like Apple, they sell the spirit of being creative. Nike sells the spirit of excellence and doing your best. Coca-Cola sells the spirit of having a good time, the spirit of happiness. Like, those are all spirits that they're selling. So people want to be a part of that because it resonates with their values. And that is the deepest level when it comes to why we actually do what we do and the decisions that we make, even on a day-to-day.
All right, next point. Usually, economic narratives rely on human interest stories for their contagion because human beings are attracted to such stories. So, basically, at the center of it, any narrative that gains a head of steam, there's going to have some unaltruistic being, a human interest. I guess it could be a collective interest as well. Like defund the police was a narrative for good or for bad, that depends on who it is. Literally, the contagious effect of the pandemic forced people to spread a narrative about what it could be done to you. And that's why you should stay in your home and mask up if you leave, for example. So that was a contagious narrative with human interest of health and survival. Bitcoin as a narrative, kind of separating from the traditional financial system and shielding yourself from whether it's debasement, whether it's intrusion, and trying to separate completely money from state.
And obviously, some narratives are way more powerful than others. One of the most powerful narratives, and this was before social media, remember we read about this in Blink, the Rosa Parks bus boycott. So imagine being a black person back then and all the other black people not riding the bus. And you're the only one that's going to ride it. They weren't getting paid. They were having to walk far. But they did it because, think about the I. They don't want to be the I that's a sellout.
Boy would have been on the bus slouched down.
Like, got the white paint on.
Hey, that's Johnson right there.
So guys, narratives can they can sometimes make you make decisions that you don't want to make. It's all about our identity.
I don't know why I would assume they got somebody named Johnson just because it's back in the day.
There was some Johnson back there.
Oh, man.
All right, guys, next point. Truth is not enough to stop false narratives. Truth matters, but only if it's in your face obvious. So, going back to the Twitter example about how false news spread more than real news. If you look at the journalism industry, they get paid to get clicks and get views on ads, whether if it's true or not. They have to meet high quotas, so they don't even have time to check to see if something is true, and that's why so much bullshit gets posted.
If they know it's gonna pop, it's gonna drop.
Yeah, even if the truth is discovered, just because of, like, going back to the whole Rosa Parks thing, just because of what the narrative is of, like, oh, he did that, you're gonna believe it because you don't want to seem like that outcast. You don't want to seem like the tinfoil hat conspiratorial guy.
Some people do. I guess it depends on the year.
Yeah, some people do.
2018, everybody was trying to pop up like, yeah, we're the tinfoil hats. They realized it wasn't that cool, so they're like,
Yep. So it's like, just like something good can spread, a virus, something bad can spread too. And the death rate has to be higher than the contagion rate for it to die off.
All right, last and final. Controlled experiments have shown that marketing of consumer products may be enhanced by appeals to patriotism. By attaching the term American dream to moral rectitude and patriotism, this narrative epidemic probably raised the homeownership rate in the U.S., as well as stimulating business in general. Now, I mean, it takes the largest responsibility or the largest portion of the total responsibility for homeownership in the U.S., selling that American dream. Because you didn't just have Americans buying homes, you had people coming from across the world looking to fulfill that American dream, which is coming over here, finding a good job with a good wage, good livable plus a little more wage, and they were able to get a home, raise their family, raise their children, and that pushed a lot of people to, you know what? Let me go ahead and buy a home. And then mortgages came about. And he's like, you know what? Let me go ahead and get a mortgage on that thing. And a lot of people were doing that in pursuit of living the American dream.
And just to comment on marketing using patriotism as like an anchor, look at the beef industry. They marketed eating beef, burgers, and hot dogs and shit like that American, right?
They even use like hey, this is Jimmy Dean. Wouldn't it be nice to wake up to a big old bowl of sizzling sausage? Pause. But that's what Jimmy Dean say.
They do be trying to sound American AF. I thought that'd be normal. You guys get the point, man. Most people want to represent their country. So if there is some narrative that if you're attached to it, you're representing your country well, like buying a Ford or eating beef or whatever else Americans do.
Yeah, even down to like presidential elections, it's like one president is always going to be more American than the other one. It's because they're trying to say their opposition or they ops.
America.
They ain't American. The ops ain't American, but I am, even though we're both running for president and he's super American. They're both super American usually. But one is always going to make it seem like he's not an American and I am an American. But it's like, but that's because that's how powerful the patriotic narrative can be. Just look at Texas.
Perfect example of an American state.
That narrative has been dominant there forever, except Austin. It's not really so much in Austin. Sorry for my Austinians.
I'm going to take us out, guys. We appreciate y'all for watching.
As always.
If you got value, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what narratives we should be aware of. Let us know your feedback on this video. Let us know what book you want us to review next. If we read it, we'll review it. If we didn't, we'll get to it.
Ooh.
You know how we do it.
Ooh.
Like, comment, subscribe. It's been a vibe.